In this video, we're going to discuss about properties of limits. So, meron tayo ditong 8 properties. But, ang ipoprove lang natin ay yung properties 1 to 5. Okay, so 6 to 8. So, kayo na yung bahalang dumiskarte kung paano siya ipoprove. So, let's start with number 1. Limit of a constant. Let k be any real number and f of x is equal to k. Then the limit of f of x as x approaches c is equal to k. So i-prove natin to. For number 1. So proof. Okay. So by definition of limit, so for any positive epsilon, may mag-e-exist na positive delta such that 0 less than absolute value of x minus c less than delta implies absolute value of f of x minus k is less than epsilon. Okay, so dapat mapatunayan natin na itong conclusion ay true. Okay, so now, so since according to the given, so yung f of x daw natin ay equal sa k. So i-substitute natin. So this implies absolute value of k minus k less than epsilon. And then what is absolute value of k minus k? That is absolute value of 0 less than epsilon. And that is 0 less than epsilon, which is true because epsilon must be positive. Okay, so therefore, the limit of a constant is true. Okay, so i-prove naman natin yung property number 2. So let f of x is equal to x. Then yung limit daw ng f of x as x approaches c is equal to c. So for number 2, proof for number 2. So again, let's use the definition of limit. For any positive epsilon, there exists delta greater than 0 such that 0 less than absolute value of x minus c less than delta implies absolute value of x f of x minus c less than epsilon. Okay, now since delta is arbitrary, so let's choose delta to be equal to epsilon. So choose delta to be equal to epsilon. So that means 0 less than x minus c less than delta, which is equal to epsilon, implies absolute value of f of x minus c less than epsilon. And what is f of x? So according dito sa given, yung f of x natin ay equal sa x. Okay, so that means f of x is x minus c less than epsilon, which is true sa ating assumption. So that proves property number 2. Okay, so let's have number 3. Limit of equal functions. So suppose f and g are functions whose domains contains the set S defined by x such that 0 less than absolute value of x minus c less than r for some positive r. If f of x equals g of x for any value of x, element of S, and if the limit of g of x as x approaches c is L, then yung limit din ng f of x as x approaches c is also L. So let's prove this property. Okay. So let's use again the definition of limit for proof 3. So by definition of limit, given positive epsilon, so may mag-e-exist na positive delta such that 0 less than absolute value of x minus c less than delta, or the distance between x and c is less than delta but positive, implies the distance between g of x and L less than epsilon. Okay, so according kasi sa given, yung limit daw ng g of x as x approaches c is equal to L. So now, kailangan natin mapalabas na yung limit din ng f of x as x approaches c ay L din. Okay? So now, according dito sa ating given, so magi-equal daw ang f of x tsaka g of x kapag daw yung domain contains this set. So ilet natin yung delta kung saan gumagalaw yung values ng x. So ilet natin yung delta to be less than r. So somewhere between 0 and r. Okay, so let's choose delta be less than r. So bakit natin pinili yung delta to be less than r? Para magamit natin yung equal functions. Okay, so that means f of x is equal to g of x. So then, yung 0 less than absolute value of x minus c less than delta implies now that the absolute value of g of x minus L is equal to absolute value of f of x minus L. Because we choose delta to be less than r, which is somewhere between dito sa s. So, pwede nating magamit yung equality ng functions, and that is less than epsilon. So, that proves property number 3. Okay, next. Let's proceed to property number 4, limit of a sum. If limit of f of x is equal to, as x approaches c is L, and limit of g of x as x approaches c is M, then limit of f of x plus g of x as x approaches c is L plus M. Okay? So, dito sa limit of a sum, okay na rin, understood na rin yung limit of a difference. Okay, so kapag naka-minus, so damay na siya sa theorem na to. Okay, so let's prove property number 4. So for our proof, okay, so gamitin ulit natin definition of limit. So let epsilon be greater than 0. Then may mag-e-exist na delta 1, delta 2, positive delta 1 and delta 2 such that 0 less than absolute value of x minus c less than delta 1 implies, dun muna tayo sa f of x, absolute value of f of x minus L less than epsilon over 2 since epsilon is arbitrary naman. Okay, and then 0 less than absolute value of x minus c less than delta 2 implies g of x minus L less than delta over 2. Okay, so next, kunin natin yung mas maliit na value ng delta 1, delta 2 para magamit natin kahit aling conclusion dito. So let's define delta to be the minimum of delta 1 sa comma delta 2. So then 0 less than absolute value of x minus c less than delta is equal to, implies the absolute value of f of x plus g of x. So dito kukunin na natin yung sa limit ng sum minus L plus M. So dapat mapalabas natin to na less than epsilon para masabi natin na yung limit ng f of x plus g of x ay L plus M. Okay, so dapat less than epsilon siya. So now, distribute natin tong negative. So this implies absolute value of f of x plus g of x minus L minus m. Tapos pagsamahin natin f of x minus L tapos g of x minus m. So absolute value of f of x minus L plus g of x minus m. Okay? And then, by the way, hindi pala siya implies. So this is equal. Equal now to, dapat mapalabas pala natin siya na less than. Okay? Then, by triangle inequality, pwede nating paghiwalayin tong nasa loob na absolute value. So this will be less than or equal. So by the way, mali ito. This must be equal. Okay? And then this is less than or equal to absolute value of f of x minus L plus absolute value of g of x minus m. Okay? And then, yung absolute value of f of x minus L, so eto na, magagamit na natin yung conclusion kasi ang ginamit natin na delta ay yung minimum ng delta 1 or delta 2. So, pwede natin gamitin yung conclusion nila pareho. So, absolute value of f of x minus L is less than epsilon over 2. So, less than epsilon over 2. Plus, absolute value ng g of x minus m. So, this is m pala. Okay? Is also less than over 2. Okay? So, less than over epsilon over 2. And then, epsilon over 2 plus epsilon over 2, that is equal to epsilon. So, as you can see, napalabas natin na this value, absolute value, is less than epsilon with this assumption. So, therefore, ito na yung proof ng limit of a sum. So, this is done. Okay, so punta naman tayo sa property number 5. Limit of a product. If limit of f of x as x approaches c is L and limit of g of x as x approaches c is m, then limit of the product of f of x and g of x as x approaches c is L times m. Yung product ng limits nila. Okay, so let's prove number 5. So yung proof na ito medyo mahaba-haba. Okay. So dito sa proof natin, halimbawa meron tayong positive epsilon. So suppose epsilon is greater than 0. So ang kailangan mapakita natin na may mag-e-exist na delta such that 0, yung 0 less than x minus c, absolute value of x minus c less than delta implies the absolute value of f of x, g of x minus lm less than epsilon. So, definition ng limit yan. Okay? So, yan yung target nating ma-prove. So, now, let's start. So, let epsilon sub 1 comma epsilon sub 2 be greater than 0. So, yung epsilon sub 1 tsaka yung epsilon sub 2 para sa dalawang functions yan. So, then, may mag-e-exist ding dalawang positive value, arbitrary numbers, delta 1, delta 2, greater than 0, such that, by definition of limit, so 0 less than absolute value of x minus c less than delta 1 implies, dun muna tayo kay x, f of x minus L less than delta epsilon sub 1. Then yung sa kabila naman, x minus c less than delta 2 implies absolute value of g of x minus m less than epsilon sub 2. Okay? So next, gawin natin, mag-form tayo ng magiging value ng M in terms of L. Okay? So let's consider f of x equals f of x minus L plus M. So dito, same lang naman sila. They are similar. Nag-minus lang ako tsaka nag-add ng L. So kunin natin yung absolute value ng both sides ng equation. So absolute value of f of x minus L plus L. So this is also equal to absolute value. No, i-diretso na natin. So dito pwede nating paghiwalayin yung f of x minus L tsaka yung L by triangle inequality. So this will be less than or equal to absolute value of f of x minus L plus absolute value of L. Okay, so pinaghiwalay natin. But yung absolute value of f of x minus L according to the given, that is less than epsilon sub 1. So this is less than epsilon sub 1 plus absolute value of L. So let's choose this one to be the value of M. Okay, so let's define M to be epsilon sub 1 plus absolute value of L. So now, i-form na natin yung dito para dito sa conclusion. So let's have let's consider again f of x, g of x minus Lm. So this is equal to f of x, g of x minus Lm. Tapos mag-add tayo ng m f of x. Mag-minus din tayo ng m f of x. So meron purpose dyan. Okay, kasi kailangan nating magamit to mamaya sa susunod na proof. So papakita ko mamaya. So ang gawin natin, i-factor out natin yung may f of x. So dito, pagsamahin natin to, factor out natin yung f of x. Ito sa dalawang to. So matitira ay g of x plus m. Okay, ito na lang pala, ito na lang yung gawin natin. Yung f of x tsaka itong minus f of x para g of x minus m. F of x, g of x minus m. Tapos ang pagsamahin na lang natin ay ito. So factor out natin yung m para maging f of x minus L. F of x minus L. So may purpose kasi tayo dito, f of x minus L tsaka g of x minus m. Mamaya dito sa taas. Okay? And then, so ang next natin gawin, kunin natin yung absolute value ng both sides. Okay, so absolute value ng f of x, g of x minus Lm equals absolute value ng f of x, g of x minus m plus m f of x minus L. Okay. Then next, pwede natin gamitin yung triangle inequality dito pag hiwalayin natin yung absolute value kasi merong plus. So this will be less than or equal to. So less than or equal to absolute value ng f of x, g of x minus m plus absolute value of m f of x minus L. Okay? And pwede natin paghiwalayin yung multiplication property ulit ng absolute value. So this is absolute value of f of x times absolute value of g of x minus m plus absolute value of m times absolute value of f of x minus L. Okay? So now, this will be less than, so yan yung purpose ng ginawa natin kanina. Yung nag-plus tayo tas nag-minus ng ganito. Kasi ang target natin mapalabas tong g of x minus m tsaka f of x minus L. So, kaya natin pinamalabas yan para magamit natin yung conclusion dito sa definition ng limit. So, yung absolute value of f of x minus L less than sa delta, sa epsilon sub 1. Tapos, yung g of x minus m less than sa epsilon sub 2. So, this will be less than absolute value of f of x. Okay? Absolute value of... By the way, sige, tuloy natin. Absolute value of f of x. Epsilon sub 2. So, this is epsilon sub 2. Plus absolute value of m times epsilon sub 1. Okay? And then, gamitin na natin tong una. Diba yung absolute value of f of x is less than del epsilon sub 1 plus L, absolute value of L. And this epsilon sub 1 plus absolute value of L is our m. So that means ito ay less than sa m. So lagay natin tong m. So this will be less than m times epsilon plus absolute value of m times epsilon sub 1. This is epsilon sub 1. Okay. Tama. Okay. So, good. By the way, this is epsilon sub 2 pala. Then next, let's now choose epsilon since epsilon is arbitrary. So, let's now choose epsilon sub 1 is equal to epsilon over 2m. And epsilon sub 2 is equal to epsilon over 2m din. Okay, since yung epsilon sub 1 tsaka epsilon sub 2 ay arbitrary naman. For any arbitrary positive value of epsilon din. And then, let's set delta to be the minimum of delta 1 and delta 2. So, para magamit nga natin yung conclusion, so kunin natin yung mas maliit na value ng delta. So, by definition of limit, so pupunta na tayo sa limit uli. X minus c less than delta implies absolute value of f of x, g of x minus lm is less than, so eto ay less than, absolute value neto, yung ginawa natin kanina is less than this one, m times epsilon sub 2 plus absolute value of m times epsilon sub 1. And then, yung epsilon sub 2 tsaka epsilon sub 1, ito yun. So, this will be equal to m times ano yung epsilon sub 2, that is epsilon over 2m plus absolute value of m times epsilon sub 1, that is epsilon over 2m also. Substitute na natin. So makakancel yung m. So dito makakancel na rin yung m, although naka-absolute value siya since may m naman sa denominator, so makakancel pa rin yan. And then and by the way, kahit naman may absolute value yan, ang m natin ay positive, sure yan. Kasi absolute value isa, yung isa epsilon sub 1. Okay, kaya makakancel pa rin natin yan, yung absolute value, same lang sa m yan. And then, ang matitira, epsilon over 2 plus epsilon over 2. And that is epsilon. So, as you can see, napalabas natin na this is less than epsilon for this condition. Okay. Okay, so this is done for property number 5. Okay, so meron pang last 3 properties pero hindi ko na siya ipoprove. So property number 6, limit of a quotient. Kapag meron tayong dalawang limits, f of x, g of x, limit ng f of x ay L, yung g of x ay M. And if M is not equal to 0, yung limit ng g of x, then yung limit ng quotient ng dalawang functions na to ay equal sa quotient ng limits nila, L over M. Then for number 7, this is the limit of a composite function. If f is continuous at L, and if limit of g of x equals L as x approaches c, then limit ng f of g of x as x approaches c is equal to f of L. So sinubstitute mo lang sa loob yung L. Okay? And then for the limit of inequalities, suppose that limit of f of x as x approaches c is L, and limit of g of x as x approaches c is M. Kapag daw yung f of x ay less than or equal to g of x for all x in some open interval or some interval about c, then L is less than or equal, yung limit ng f of x ay less than or equal sa limit ng g of x. Okay, so yun lang for the properties of limits.